Welcome back. Episode 62, cruising along.
What's up, shitbags? Welcome back. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in, watching, support, everything. You guys have been fantastic sending in questions. We've gotten questions now from our last two guests, Logan here and Jeff in the previous one. You guys are great with that. Be sure to send them in however you want to do it. Make sure we get it, and we'll make sure we get the question included. So thank you guys for that. Thank you guys for the support. And without further ado, let's go ahead and bring in Logan. Thanks for coming on, Logan.
Absolutely, guys. I am beyond excited to be here. It's been,
Awesome.
5 years since we first met at end of the job?
Yeah, something like
It's
that.
been a while. It's been a while. Brent and I were just talking about earlier that it was crazy because 5 years ago, all of this that we're doing, I mean, your training company, which we'll get into, the podcast, like it was all ideas and all very early onset. And now it's like, hey, look at this. So it's pretty cool. Everything comes around. But why don't you go ahead and give a quick introduction about yourself?
Yeah, I'm Logan Hinkle. I'm 26 years old. I work in West Memphis, Arkansas. I'm a paramedic captain there. Not to be confused with an engine captain, for clarity's sake. But I do ride an ambulance, still do active fire duty, oversee day-to-day EMS and response operations for us there. I still volunteer in the Central Arkansas area. I've been a volunteer since I was 17. I started all the way back in late 2016 as a volunteer at the age of 17 years old and haven't looked back. I've worked in part-time volunteer and career capacities in the last 9 or so years, and full-time on an ambulance, some in between here and there. You know, having that paramedic is a gift sometimes, and sometimes it's really not. So
yeah, absolutely.
As you guys saw when we were getting set up, I've got a 4-year-old son, and then my wife, Jessica, kind of keeps the home together. Riker keeps me moving. So we're living life and having fun, man.
Awesome, man.
Awesome. Well, I think we'll kind of dive right into Heath's question that he told you to be worried about, but very interested to seeing. In your introduction, you talk about you're only 26. You still have a lot of experience in terms of doing it. But his question is, how do you balance being young yet having the level of knowledge that you do when you're going around sharing this information?
Being young, I am still incredibly excited about the job. Moving at 1,000,000 miles an hour when a call comes in, moving with purpose, excited to ask questions, excited to learn. The hardest part, I think, dealing with that is the true humility, right? So not just being overly humble on purpose, but taking that information that you may have, because it's a little weird. I'm 26, but people will come up and ask questions all the time. They'll say, hey, you've been to a class on this, or I've watched you do this on the fire ground. And how do you deliver that as someone who's 15 years younger than this tenured engine captain that just came up and asked you about vertical ventilation? It's all, you have to be careful with your delivery, because I get excited and start drumming, and sometimes the delivery can come off a little sideways, and you have to be cognizant of that. I understand where I'm at in my career. I understand that I'm at the point where a lot of people say you've got just enough experience to be really dangerous. And I don't disagree with them. I've got just enough experience to be really confident at certain things that can spill into areas of my job that I'm not as confident in. All right. I'll be straight honest. Up until about a month ago, I haven't touched a nozzle on a first in fire in like 3 months. Mm-hmm. I've ended up on search, ventilation, RIT, things like that. And sometimes that confidence can spill over a little bit into the fire attack. You get a little overzealous, just as an example. You can push a little too far. You can get out of rhythm. Whenever you are kind of where I'm at in my career, you just have to be really careful with your delivery, with the energy that you give with that delivery. That's the biggest part, is your delivery may be really solid. Your knowledge base, the way you give the knowledge across may be really solid, but the way you're delivering it is kind of rough, kind of choppy, kind of sounds arrogant, but it's the excitement coming out. You're so excited that someone wants to talk firefighting with you. That's something I still struggle with. I've struggled with it for years, and the guys that work with me, and the men of the RFT cadre will tell you the same thing. And sometimes he gets a little hot about certain topics.
I definitely have that teaching some stuff that I learned on shift and in the department too. It's kind of like, yeah, I only have 6 years on or 7 years part time and full time, and then talking to guys that have 20, 30 years on. It's kind of like, I don't know shit. I just started my career, right? But I took a class, and this is what I've learned, and trying to get that all situated and delivered is a very hard part, and I'm trying to work on that myself.
I think tying it in too is with that humility comes honesty. If someone comes up and asks me about something that I've learned at a class or done a bunch on the training ground, I'll be able to tell them, hey, yes, I've learned this, but I've not ever employed it on a fire ground.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not going to advocate either way because I don't know if it works here for us.
Right.
There's certain tactics that with our manpower and staffing and the way that we operate aren't going to work. We haven't tried them. We haven't done them. And I run into this issue. I used to run into this issue myself, and I see some younger guys making the same mistake is coming in and being hot and heavy with these tactics and with these ideas. And you kind of ask them, you sit down and be a mentor to them, as not necessarily a senior guy, but someone who's seen a little bit more of the job, and say, hey, sprinkle it in a little bit every now and then. Maybe that is a good tactic. It's a good idea, but sprinkle it in. See what the guys that have been here a lot longer than us think.
Right.
And some people struggle.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think. Oh, go ahead, Bryce.
Yeah, I was just going to say the doubling down on that delivery. I mean, if you come in and you be honest with the delivery, like both things that you were saying, that's where you're going to get the buy-in, because guys will see right through it. Everyone talks about it all the time that like you can bullshit until you get to the fire ground. And so if you're out here and you're like, oh, this is what works great on a fire ground, this is what works great on a fire ground, and it's only because you did it in a training, and you actually get to a fire ground and someone sees you do a different tactic and you're like, well, I've never tried it. Like all of it goes out the window. Like you gotta just dependent exactly how you deliver it needs to be exactly how you learned it. You can't just be out there claiming, oh, I did this, I know this. Like people are going to know that because the fire ground proves all.
Right. Yeah, I think
that's like, I ride an ambulance. I do ride an ambulance, but we are task assigned. We're SOG policies, right? We're SOG fire ground assignments. So in the offensive residential strategy, the first arriving ambulance and the second arriving ambulance are assigned rescue duties. Of course, being ventilation, backside OV, starting a primary from somewhere other than where the truck company went in.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever we're speaking on those topics, when we go to the fire ground, most of the time I'm ending up on the roof. So I am 100% comfortable talking about roof work and search with the guys I work with. At the same time, I'm not going to sit there and lecture about engine work because I get to do that maybe once or twice a year. And usually it's on a building that is well off, self-vented. We're going to make a transition anyway.
Yeah.
So I don't get to push Holbrook very often.
Yeah. I think bringing like stuff that you learn to your department and kind of sprinkling stuff that you already do at your department, kind of make a happy medium. I think that goes a long way in kind of creating a training. And that also comes back on the training ground too, is you have to train on stuff that you learn too with your crew to kind of get that happy medium so everyone knows what you're doing and kind of develop your own tactic from the stuff that you learn and you're already doing to kind of create that for your department.
My engine captain, we talk all the time about training for our station. I'm on the east side of town at Threes. It's the busiest station in the city. And we take pride in that. We take pride in being the busiest station in the city, which we're not near as busy as some folks are. But, out of that station between the ambulance and the engine, there's probably 12 to 14 calls a day, roundabouts between the two of us. And we still take pride in going out and doing training and stuff. And actually yesterday we were talking about training for the guys, trying to figure out some stuff to do because the heat index the next 2 weeks is going to be like 120 degrees. we're probably not going to go out. I'm all for fitness on the fire ground. I'm all for working out in our gear. But, we kind of talked and said, hey, let's not kill everybody pulling lines 30 times in full gear, But kind of what we talked about was overall training is if you fill a bucket up, if you try to fill up a 5-gallon bucket while someone's holding it all at once, it's going to get really heavy.
Mm-hmm.
But if you fill it up 1 cup at a time, they're going to get used to the weight.
Yeah, for sure.
And that builds into that. That's the same way that you build a standard, right? If you try to change the standard overnight, you're going to have bucking broncos all over your fire department. But if you sprinkle little changes here or there and stop tolerating certain things and start encouraging other things, it's the same process. They're going to become used to it. It's the same analogy as boiling a frog. You turn it up all at once, the frog's going to jump. If you just slowly turn it up, it's going to stay in the pan. It's the same. It's the same thing. It's all psychology.
Absolutely. Kind of sticking with the delivery of this train and everything, because obviously you've used it in your extracurriculars. Talk about your training company, I guess, your cadre. I mean, where did it start? Where's it going? What's the direction that you're aiming for?
Man, it started right about 4 years ago now. JP Gardner, Connor Roberts, and I, all three, younger guys in the service, good friends, have been for several years before this ever became an idea. Which you guys, I think, met JP and Connor both at End of the Job. Whenever that's kind of where some of this discussion was going on. We kind of saw there's a gap, right? I think the best way to put it is there's a gap, right? A lot of the fire departments in America, one, aren't staffed, or two, if they are staffed, they've got like a driver and an officer. That's the majority of America. Not everywhere has 4, 5, 6 engines, 2 truck companies, a battalion chief, a rescue, ambulances. Not everybody has that level of staffing. And especially nobody really has, outside of 30 or 40 major cities, has more than 30 people on shift at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the training and a lot of the tactics that were being put out are geared towards those larger departments. Mm-hmm. That's kind of the gap that we stepped in to bring people together to fill. We were at points in our careers, and we still are. We're growing. JP works for a large metropolitan department now. Connor works for one of the busiest, fire duty departments in Central Arkansas outside of the 2 major metros. I am where I am, but we sat down together and said, we aren't the ones to do this. We're not the ones to go out and try to fill this gap. We can be the orchestrators. We can put the logistics together, and we went out and got a few really solid guys that had been mentors to us as we came up in our careers, and reached out and got with them and said, hey, this is an idea that we've got. This is something that we want to do. Are you guys interested in coming on and really being the voice behind this, right? Like, I have the social medias and I post and do the videos and stuff, but when it comes to the training, when it comes to the street level experience, it's those guys. Mm-hmm. It's James Cook, bless his heart. He's out. He's hurt bad right now. He'll be back in about a year. Justin Levy, he's been on the job for, I don't even remember how long. He just made fire chief at his department there in Missouri. Noah Casillas. Noah's been on a truck company for at least 10 years, just west of San Antonio. Wade Ambrose is the training major for Broken Arrow Fire Department there in Oklahoma. Bert Roberts is a truck captain at Ozark, Missouri. He's been on the job longer than I've been able to drink, almost as long as I've been alive. So these guys are the ones that put it all together, right? And we took those guys and said, we want to build classes. We want to build curriculum around the fact that not everybody has staffing to complete tasks simultaneously. All right, we need to talk about prioritization when it comes to mindset. You know, we talk about the mindset that you have before the call even drops. You know, what are you thinking when that, you know, some stations we have a tone that's for working fires. When that tone hits, what's in your head? Like, oh, I'm going to go and stretch a line or do this, or is it, hey, we're going to do whatever's best for life in this building? And all of our curriculum is built around supporting life. All of our engine company stuff, all of our truck company stuff, you know, search specific, fire attack specific, thermal imaging schools, everything that we've got is built to support life. And that's our mindset. That's our ideology. And it really was never supposed to take off to the point where it is now, truthfully. It was never supposed to. And that was never the goal. You know, the goal was really to get together 3 or 4 times a year, teach a couple classes, you know, go to a couple conferences together, and really that be it. And then last year and this year, this year especially, it's blown up. You know, we've taught about 25 or 30 classes this year between large ones and small ones, majority of smaller ones. But we ended up in Boise, Idaho in March for March Mayhem with Gino and the crew. You know, we got to hang out with a bunch of really cool dudes from AOTC. Chief is really cool. Gino was awesome to us. You know, last year a couple of us ended up in Atlanta. This year, not with RFT, but you know, 2 or 3 of our guys were teaching with their own group in Atlanta.
Awesome.
You know, it's huge. And we've got Work After Dark, which is our 14-hour nighttime live fire operations class, is coming up on September 19th. The weekend after that is before the Bellfire Conference in Little Rock. And we're doing 2 days, 8 hours of live fire engine, 8 hours of live fire search. And then in November, we're doing another nighttime live fire class at the First In Fire Conference.
Nice.
You know, so awesome. there's a stacked fall right before deer season for you, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But it was never the goal to get to this point. You know, it's not a big push that we've made. Like, we got to get more places. We got to get more classes. It's all just happened generically. You know, just, you know, send it to the guys. Hey, they're accepting proposals. Do you guys want to put in for it? Yeah, absolutely. We'll put in for it. And then, you know, put the proposal together and send it in. And we got selected. And nice. I couldn't be more thankful for it. You know, it's one of the coolest part of it is, yes, we get to go teach. We get to go do these things. But, you know, like at these conferences, we're going and we're being students if we're able to be students. Yeah. First In has three days of lecture before our class is even going, and we don't start class till that afternoon. You know, so we're thankful to have these opportunities to not only, you know, help other people grow, but to grow ourselves is really one of the key focuses. And anybody who's taught for any amount of time will tell you that you learn more about yourself and your skills teaching than you ever will in a class.
Speaking of going around doing these trainings, all the conferences that you've been able to go to and the classes you've been able to teach, what do you think is one training deficiency that you're seeing across all these different departments?
A lot of it has to do with realism, right? And that is, for us, that has become a focus as we've grown as a group, is, you know, adding realism. You know, we focus really, really hard on doing 2-day classes. And really, you know, if you ask some of the students, it's 2 different days. And what I mean by that is day 1 is very relaxed, very still. There's not a lot of excitement going on. And it's because we're focused on breaking some bad habits, adding some good habits, and reinforcing those good habits, right? We want to build competency before we start stressing you out. You know, it's kind of ill of us to come in and add a whole bunch of stress and crazy day 1. It's not good for it. Doesn't go well. It doesn't build confidence in these skills. So then we'll come in day 2 And day 2 on a 2-day class for us is normally a full-blown scenario day, right? And we'll start in the morning. The early scenarios are normally pretty still. A little bit of stress added in, maybe, some family members, but nothing heightened, nothing crazy. And then as we go through the day, the stress really starts to crank up. We really start hitting the gas. We've got I've got some props that I'm able to borrow every now and then. We have a couple of scenarios for our search class where you've got jumpers, and it's not an instructor in turnouts laying on the ground. It's one of our wives laying on the ground with a prosthetic leg that's an open tib fib fracture with ketchup on it. Something legitimate that you might end up seeing at some point in your career. If they just jump from a second floor window, their legs might be broken. So it's a distracting injury. It causes your brain. I did a little bit of time doing some police style work, and a lot of our training there is all about the OODA loop: observe, orient, decide, act. And that is a part of all of our scenario stuff. Is as we get further into the day and you start getting comfortable, we're going to start forcing you to be uncomfortable. And we do that by putting things in that aren't out of the realm of realism. None of them are really crazy, but it's there to reset your OODA loop. If you're in a training building that you've been in all day yesterday, what are you going to do? You're going to try to play the building. Like, oh, I was in here all day yesterday. What you don't realize is we have moved walls around in here or boxed doors in. We take forcible entry doors and close them in. And, we call it the gut check, and they'll force the first door and they can't see the second door. So, every time that scenario goes for the first time, we're waiting for the thud. That thud is them trying to play the building and running headfirst into the second door. It's little things like that. And what it does is it's not to mess with the students. It's to create teachable moments. Whenever you've got students that are already super dialed in, super good at it, you've got to create teachable moments. And that's not by setting them up to fail. It's by putting them in uncomfortable situations that make them forget to think, or they don't see, or they just act on instinct. And that, the double door is a great example of that. Is, oh, I forced the first door. Now you've got another one. That was a storm door. Congratulations. Now you're in a smoke condition, or, you've got jumpers out of windows. We'll have instructors hang out of windows. They'll come around the building and they'll have a fence that wasn't there on the last scenario, that now they've got to look at this guy hanging out of a window shirtless and run all the way around this fence and then avoid the power line that's dropped from the fence over to the building and put their ladder up and get this combative smoke drunk victim out of this window. These are all things that happen. We came off the ambulance and pulled a lady out of a window a month ago. She was smoke drunk. She threw her purse down at us while we were throwing the ladder. So these are things that legitimately happen on fire grounds, and they create a reset in your OODA loop. You've already made a decision. Now there's a stimuli that comes in and says, I don't know what you thought you were doing, but you're not doing that anymore. Now you've got to change. You've got to make a decision, right? That's our big focus, and I think that's some of the gaps. Is certain classes are geared towards certain skills. Those are different, right? If I'm going to a ventilation class, well, yeah, I'm not going to reset their OODA loop. I'm not going to create a bunch of stress because we're learning vertical ventilation. But if we're doing scenario-based evolutions, stress should absolutely be a part of that scenario.
Yeah.
For some people, it may just make them think. For others, it may gut check them, and they may just find out how much they don't know. I'm going to raise my hand and say that's happened to me several times. I'm not afraid to admit it. I've been gut checked a few times on scenarios. Stressful situations happened and reacted probably not in the best way, right? Didn't do the skill, like dropping a ladder a little bit, or messing a stretch up a little bit because of the amount of stress that was applied. And it helps me grow.
Mhm.
And so, we try and do the same thing, whenever we go out and do. That is a gap, and it's starting to be closed. Over the last couple of years, going out and watching and doing and talking to all the guys that are doing what we do is, everybody's kind of starting to close that gap a little bit with the stress.
Absolutely. I'm going to pull it back to the smoke drone because I think that's a great transition into the topic that I was most excited to talk to you about here, and that is cyanocit. So I know you're a huge component of it. We've talked about it before on here with the fire rescue survey and stuff. I know people are like fucking medic shit. I know, but we got a medic captain on. We got to ask him about this. So, what do you think? How important is cyanocit in today's fire service? And how is it being used, or should it be being used to drive these outcome-based and driven tactics?
So you mentioned the rescue survey. We chat back and forth. A few of us chat back and forth about this on a decent occasion, right? And we're all of the same mindset. You can be as proactive as you want with search. You can push places that you probably shouldn't be in. You can occupy space that is questionably searchable, questionably, and bring people out of these buildings. What good have you done if you don't have the fix for what's killing them 80% of the time? What good has that done? Oh, we gave them a chance. No, you just made sure they didn't burn to death. They're still dead. And innovation. You could have, this is the analogy I use in class. You could duct tape a level 1 trauma center to the front door of that house. And if you don't have a cyano kit, they're dead anyway. There's no fix. There's no change. You can innovate them. You can do CPR. You can give fluids. You can give medicine. If that medicine is not cyano kit on the label, or, there's not a generic. If it doesn't say cyano kit on the label and it's not beet red, you're not doing anything. And the reason for that is the misconception, right? Around 20% of our victims actually die from burns. And the victims that actually die from burns are the victims who were incinerated, carbonized, or burned so significantly that their body couldn't function anymore. The other 80% is CO and hydrogen cyanide in tandem, right? Hydrogen cyanide is produced in the lethal dose, if I remember right. I'm going to try and quote it. If I'm wrong, someone throw something at me. Normal lethal dose in the 2-minute range is right around 1,000 parts per million. It's produced in most residential structure fires with modern furnishings in excess of 30,000 parts per million. So you're taking that lethal dose, multiplying it by 30, and saying, okay, we're just not going to carry the medicine that fixes that.
Yeah.
It's if your department has the capability to be ALS, even if you're not right now, if you have the capability to be ALS first response, and carry these kits, and you're not, but you're saying and going out and saying, we have a progressive search culture, we care about victim survivability, you're only getting about half the puzzle. Right? And maybe you don't have an ambulance like we do. It was a lot easier for us to integrate these. We really started carrying them in late last year, and within a week and within 2 weeks of having it, we gave it twice. In the last 6 months, 7 months, we've given it 4 times. 3 of those were really good outcomes. One of them got back, but the outcome wasn't exactly what we wanted. That person ended up passing a few days later. But the best chance was given. All right. We did absolutely every piece of the puzzle was put together. Everything was done right. The victim, search was initiated within 60 seconds of the air brake. The victim was located within 5 minutes of arrival in all of these cases. They were out within 10 minutes of arrival. Cyano kit was on board within 2 minutes of removal from the building. CPR was in progress within seconds of removal. Airway and about all these things were done. All of the pieces of the puzzle were put together. And if you have the capability to do that and you're not, you're falling short. right? It's not sexy. It's not pretty. It doesn't sell tickets to conferences. But if we're really going to push as the American Fire Service, we really want progress. Everybody is talking about search. Everybody's talking about survivability. Everybody's talking about victims. And the reason that we're here is for them. It's for the victims. It's for the people. Cyano kits are for the people. That is the only fix. If they've got cyanide bonded to complex 4 in the electron transport chain, your body has to use oxygen to create energy. Right? Your body uses oxygen in your cells to take sugar and break apart and generate energy, ATP, but we're not going to go that nerdy today. And what happens is it's different than CO. CO is just general cellular hypoxia because the blood cells can't carry the oxygen, right? With cyanide, it stops your cells from being able to use oxygen to produce energy. That creates a whole myriad of problems. The reason that's a problem if you don't carry a kit is with CO, you can hyperoxygenate and fix that problem, right? You know, we're going to look for a burn center with a hyperbaric chamber and all these things. We can fix that problem with oxygen. With cyanide, it doesn't matter how much oxygen we push into these people. The body cannot use it. That's where the issue comes in. So, you know, going back to having an ER duct taped to the front door, you could have the best doctors on the planet and take their cyanide antidote away and have them tubed, you know, intubated, IVs, medicines running, all these things. And within 10 to 20 minutes, they're going to be brain dead because their brain can't work. It can't use oxygen. It's just the same as if they weren't breathing at all. And that's where some of the, you know, everybody looks at the cost. Everybody likes to look at cost benefit analysis, right? Let's talk a little admin stuff. If there's a chief that listens to this, this is just for you. Cost benefit analysis is a huge thing in the fire service now. It's turned into a business, right? And it's out of necessity. It has to. The city wants it ran that way. And you have to run it that way if you want to be cognizant of your money. A cyano kit costs right at $1,600 from Boundtree, which is our supplier. That kit is good for 2.5 to 3 years. It's good for about 3 years from the date of manufacture. If you buy it and don't use it, that's people's biggest concern, is buying it and not using it. Okay, that is a valid concern. But what happens if you end up like us, and you put it on the truck, and all of a sudden you pull 4 people out in 6 months? What if you didn't have that? How many of those people would have died? How many of your citizens that pay taxes in your city and expect their fire department to do everything for them that they can to survive didn't fulfill their mission all the way? And now instead of having 3 of those victims alive and 1 die, now 2 of the 4 are dead, or 3 of the 4 are dead. Because by the time we got them to a burn center, it was too late. All right, that's where I'm at on it, is if you have the ability to carry it and you don't, you're negligent. That's a firm stance on that. It's borderline negligent. And it's for the firemen, right? A lot of unions have pushed for the cyano kits and gotten them because it's for the firemen. If you have, you know, a new guy that gets freaked out in a hallway and rips his mask off, even if he only gets 5 or 6 breaths of that heavy smoke, that heavy cyanide, he's going to be altered. He's going to start having problems. His vital sign, you know, he's going to be full of cyanide. It only takes 2 or 3 breaths to start having significant problems with this. It's for the firemen too, you know, and one of the things that cyano kit does is if you document a use on a firefighter with removal, they will replace your kit for free. That is their firefighter's promise, is what they call it, if I remember right, is they will replace your kit.
That's what they call it.
But just to round that out is if you have the ability to do it and you're not, you got to take a real hard look in the mirror.
Yeah. Firefighter rescue, sir. I mean, we reference it so much. Every department should know about it and look at it because it's the hard facts. It's exactly what we are seeing. And there is, if I remember correctly, I've used it a bunch, the comparison from victims that received it and victims that didn't is a 30% mortality rate. Like you have a 30% increase in survivability chance when you receive it. There's nothing
with victims that are severely burned but still have a pulse, the change is 41%. With victims that have, 31%. With victims that are unconscious, it's 41. Unconscious victims with a pulse, the difference is 41% in survival to the hospital. That's not even the ER. That's the hospital.
Yeah.
Right? Firefighter rescue survey is not tracking discharges from the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a medical study, right? It's survival. It's what's input by the crews. You know, we've documented several rescues in the last 2 years on the rescue survey in West Memphis. And thankfully, recently, we've been able to start filling out the cyano-kit part, which is, I think, awesome. And survival to the hospital, it's 41% for victims that are unconscious, and right around 30% for victims with severe burns that are unconscious.
Yeah. There's
nothing
nothing.
yet.
There's nothing else that you do as a
mortality.
medic.
Say again?
There's nothing that we do as a medic to increase survivability that much. There's no medication we carry, no skill. There is nothing that we have, let alone, like, I'm talking even heart attack, stroke. There is nothing that increases survivability by 40% than that one med does for that victim. And that is just why it's even an argument is insane.
Yeah, when you look at medical studies, you know, and I'm a nerdy medic. I enjoy medicine almost as much as I enjoy firefighting.
Yep.
And because you make a difference. You do get to make a difference. You know, that's the other part of this is if you're in a for them mindset, you should be just as much for them whenever you're going to a shooting or a cardiac arrest as you should be when you're going to a fire.
Mm-hmm.
That stuff drives me nuts. That's a rabbit hole for a different day. But when you look at medical studies, as much as, you know, I look at medical studies when we write our protocols. I'm part of our protocol board. And we reference medical studies in our protocols. And, you know, 10% is clinical significance most of the time, depending on how the study's set up. If you were to take a medical study and say this has a 41% increase, it would become the national standard and required on every ambulance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There wouldn't be a medical director that didn't carry it if there was a medical study that said it was a 41% change.
All right.
Yeah, it's crazy that it's taken so long because it needs to. And I kind of want you to dive into, if you can, what your push for is now at that state level, because I think that's the next incredibly important step.
Yeah. So, to kind of touch base on the state level thing, something like this is incredibly personal to me. You know, not only seeing the number of victims that we do at work and seeing the changes in the outcomes there and the firefighter rescue survey data. Both of my wife's grandparents died in a house fire in rural Arkansas several years ago. So this is an incredibly personal thing. And with that being said, making the push for this at the state level it's difficult. It's hard to do because so many of our services in Arkansas are privatized, right? They have profit margins to look at. They have all these other things that they have to look at. And that's not doxing the level of service that they provide. I've worked with some exceptional providers at, you know, in the private level, but it's incredibly difficult to get a medication forced onto every ambulance at the state level, especially when it costs $1,600 a dose.
Mm-hmm.
It is a required medication in Arkansas for every emergency department to have, which is a great place. It's a great place to start. That's a really good starting point. But whenever you look at rural states, like Arkansas is an incredibly rural state. If we have a house fire 25 minutes from a hospital, kind of like where I started, a lot of our fires, we were 15, 20 minutes minutes from a hospital. That doesn't count transport. That's transport time. That doesn't count packaging and all the other things. By the time we get them to the hospital, if they're not pulseless already, they're going to be shortly.
Yeah.
Because of that cyanide. It is hard to advocate for it to be on every ambulance because, on the backside of things, I understand the costs associated with it. And I understand the likelihood in a lot of our communities of it being used is relatively low. I'm going to use Johnson County where I started as a reference. There's maybe 40 structure fires in the entire county in a year. Out of those, I think they've had, in the last 10 years, they've had 3 people pulled from buildings. The rest of them, they've had more fatalities than that, but several of those were a mountain cabin that old man has lived in for 50 years, and by the time they got there, there was no searchable space. There was no really building left.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a reality that whenever you're making a push like this, you have to take that into account.
Yeah.
Right. Some of these ambulance services or some of these departments are operating on paper thin boats already. And the best way, the progress that we've been able to make is bringing everybody in and just discussing it together and saying, hey, this is a significant medication. This is of clinical significance to this specific patient population. And they agree that it's significant. The back end of it is trying to find some way to get funding, maybe from the state or from some other entity, to be able to put these at least on like supervisor vehicles or have them accessible at these places. Some of the ways that they've been able to do it is they add them to their protocol, and the department has bought them. There's been a couple places here in the state that, the smaller department said, hey, we're not ALS, but our ambulance service is. What if we just buy them for you? Well, you're going to replace them and we use them? Duh. They're for us and for our people.
Yeah.
If you use them, we'll replace it. We're not capable of being ALS. And I think that's might be a pathway for a lot of people, not just here in Arkansas, but across the country. That might be a pathway to explore, is like, hey, if we buy this kit for $1,600, will you add it to your protocol? And some folks might give you a good answer on it.
That's awesome. I love just the push for it. Again, we talked about it a lot. I know people hate when we talk EMS, but some people don't. So you're welcome. But I just love the thought process and diving into it, because it is an important med. And it's just kind of tied in there with, blood, with cyanocate. Like, there's so much stuff that I hope in the very near future, and through ways, like you say, through cooperation, like, we'll be able to break through, because all these things that are coming out, like you said, they're clinically significant, that they are better for our patients, but they're hidden behind just the cost. Everyone, everywhere is worried about the cost. So through that collaboration, I hope that not just cyanokit, but blood, the next med that comes out, the next big, tool, whatever it might be, like, we can just start getting away from that cost and look at actually what's being beneficial for our patients.
Yeah. And part of it is prioritizing, right? What level of priority are you willing to put on this?
Mm-hmm.
If you don't make it a priority, then it's probably not going to work out. Thankfully, our admin places almost the same priority on these cyano kits as they do buying turnouts. It's of equal importance. If your turnouts are bad, they're going to buy you new ones. If we use a cyano kit, we're going to replace it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. Going back into the fire world now, you're welcome, people. We're going to move on to our last 2 questions that we have. So we have the question from our previous guest, Jeff, for you. We'll have your question that you'll ask of our next guest, and then we'll get to the kitchen table and wrap it up. So this question that we have is from Jeff Wiffmeyer. He's on St. Louis. We were talking a lot about truck work last episode, and his question is, what advice do you have for a predominantly urban truck guy regarding the more suburban and rural truck work? how do you, like his thought was, how do you teach it? How are you showing that this rural versus urban setting is just different, and how can you blend it together and go into it?
In the urban fire environment, you're not seeing a lot of single family residences, right? Unless you're in an outlying station. Like if he's in St. Louis, where I remember he's at, he might not have a whole lot of single family houses anywhere in his district.
Mhm.
You know, he's dealing with apartments, he's dealing with high rises, he's dealing with commercial structures. Truck work, the skills are similar. The why behind it changes significantly depending on what you're doing, right? Where he's probably getting to cut a lot more puck locks, and he's cutting a lot more doors. We're not doing that very often. Outside of some occasional, 5 or 6 a year, we have a good commercial fire, but we're not seeing that a lot. The last 5 out of the last 6 roofs I've been on have been walkable pitch, single family residential, right? Whenever we go out and teach it, we talk about the fact that fire is fire, right? It's the same chemical reaction. Depending on the construction, the fire is going to move in a similar manner through buildings that are of similar construction. Knowing that and understanding, you can take a lot of this why that these awesome urban dudes have from all these cuts they get to do, all this truck work they get to do, and for the sake of like ventilation, you're still just looking at the behavior. You're trying to get as close to above the fire as you can. You're trying to make the hole large enough to relieve the pressure inside the building and change the behavior of the fire so your engine can make the final push. All right, the goals are the same. If we're ventilating, well, we're ventilating to make it easier on the engine to get to the seat of the fire, and we're lifting heat and smoke off of victims, right?
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't change based on occupancy type. The way you do it and when you do it might change a little bit. Search is a different thing too. With truck work, the objective is the same. We're searching for fire and we're searching for people. The type of occupancy that you're in may be different, but your objective is the same, and you're going to complete it in a similar manner. I'm not going to speak on wide area search and commercial building search because I don't do it. I don't. We don't. That's not something that we do often enough for me to be comfortable speaking on it.
Mm-hmm.
But whenever it comes to apartments, whenever it comes to, kind of row home, whenever it comes to quadplexes or duplexes or triplexes, we see a lot of those. Not so much on the row homes. We've got an area downtown that's got a bunch of like taxpayer row home style stuff, but it doesn't burn. But we see a lot of apartments, we see a lot of single family residents, and we see a lot of quadplexes. And search wise, you're still going to target as close to the fire as you can get when you start your search, if you can. You're going to try to isolate that fire, and then you're going to search for people as you're moving through and doing that. Everybody likes to make there's a big disconnect between really super urban firefighting and super rural or suburban firefighting. The disconnect's not as big as you think. It's just the fact of you're used to what you see. Whenever you get something that's a little bit different, it might throw you off a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Advice-wise, for somebody who might be making the transition, a lot of guys move from bigger departments out to smaller departments as their career progresses. And it's stick to your guns, right? The ideology stays the same.
Yeah.
Your experience is going to become different. All right. You're going from 20-floor apartment buildings, 10-floor mid-rises to, our tallest apartment building in the city is 4 stories. So that's a change that you have to make, but understanding that the tactics and the ideology remain very similar is important there.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
I like that. You said he was going to tune back in, so hopefully that's exactly what he's looking for. But the last part we have is what people say is the hardest one, and that's you got to do the job that we've been doing. You got to come up with the question. So our next guest is Mike Bernard from up in our neck of the woods, a little north too, though. But He's go-getter, very awesome, does the Inglourious Basterds stuff, the just great teacher, and very into the job. And he's our next guest. What questions you got for him?
Ooh. Mike, what challenges do you guys have in the winter months that we don't see down here in the summer months as often, or sorry, in the southern states? And how do you guys overcome them in case we run into something like that?
The same can go to you. How do you combat 120-degree heat?
Yeah.
Yeah, right? How do you overcome 120 degrees? We add another engine.
Fair enough. No, it's awesome. That's one of the coolest parts about, like you said, fire is fire. And when we go to these conferences, it is the same everywhere, but you don't think about the outer environments. I mean, I think we talked about this a little bit when we had
David
Pruitt. When we had
Yeah.
Dave Pruitt on, he was talking about, they were in the midst of, this was last summer, they were in the midst of 120 days in a row of 100+ heat. We were like, that's just insane.
Sucks.
We can't imagine something like that. I mean, the heat index hit 100 for a week here, and everyone was dying. Like, but yeah, I mean, thanks for taking the time out for camping. The last part that we have is the kitchen table. So if there's any trainings you want to shout out, you talked a little bit about some of the trainings that you guys have upcoming. But any people, trainings, anything you want to hit on a little bit more with the last few minutes we have, the rest of the time is yours.
Y'all, these big conferences are super awesome. Some of them aren't affordable to some of the younger guys. Find some of the local conferences in your region, some of the local classes, right? There's a conference, or not conference, there's a truck and engine kind of double weekend deal coming up in Mississippi. This next weekend is the truck half, and then later this fall is the live fire engine half. They have a 10-story hotel from one of the casinos that is theirs. And you're not going to see that nationally, but it's up. It's I'm trying to remember if it Mississippi Mayhem Fools is who's doing it. That opportunities like that. There's opportunities like that all across the country that don't get pushed out all the time. Go looking for them.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Where else are you going to get a 10-story hotel with a working standpipe system to do live fire in?
That's pretty cool.
That's wild. There's opportunities like that all over the place. I talked about some of the places we're going to be this year. I'm not going to dig too far back into that, but encourage your young guys to get out of the walls. Take them with you. And if you've got a 6-month rookie, be like, hey, dude, what are you doing next weekend?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. You're going with me. So just encourage people to get outside of the walls, encourage people to get outside of the windows of the department, and go see what else there is.
Absolutely. Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for taking the time, dropping some knowledge. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Be sure to keep sending in those questions. You guys have been doing awesome. Keep it up. Mike Bernard, next guest. The post will be out before this episode, so you guys should have sent in questions already. But look forward to seeing what you guys got for us. Thanks again, Logan. Thank you all for watching. And as always, don't be a shitbag.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, Logan. Don't be a shit.